we have this notion that we sin less than someone else, or we're better than, or, because we sin differently. Really, it's also rooted in our identity, so where I'm weak in who I am, I'm easily injured by other people and their opinions. And so I have these expectations that somebody is going to, rescue me or treat me or parent me, heal me in this space. I don't even know that I've got them. This is typically what happens with people is we go into a situation and we expect this other person to have this certain response because that's what we would do. And they don't, and they're different than we are. And then we take offense to that because we've got some childhood wounding or we believe a lie. And then we project that onto this other person. And now we've got World War III happening. And this is going to sound really rude and blunt, maybe too direct, but we all just need to grow the ever loving heck up. When, we have places in us, and that sounds so rude, but we have places in us that need parenting.
Yeah.
And Jesus wants to parent us in those spaces. God wants to be a good father and heal us of those lies that we believe, the I'm not good enough, or everything needs to be perfect, or I won't be liked, all that garbage. And he wants to heal us of that. And what happens when we are healed of it is it's easy for us to own our mistakes.
Welcome to another episode of What to Say and How to Say It. Today, we're going to discuss what to say when no one takes responsibility. Fun topic. I hope you enjoy it. When we think about conflict and what happens and how much blame happens and how much back and forth happens and how pride shows up and insecurity shows up, we get into this really awful cycle where we're the victim and they're the villain. And it's really not productive. It's not helpful. So what we want to do is help our listeners walk away today with a really powerful tool that will help break that cycle and get them out of that mindset. So I have Nina here, as always, our expert, and I want to get your thoughts today on what happens in that awful, crazy cycle when we're blaming the other person and no one's taking responsibility.
Well, I don't know how to better define a hot mess than that, right? When nobody's taking responsibility and there's blame, shooting arrows at each other, accusations, all of that. And this is a huge thing, because if we don't overcome this, if we don't learn how to deal with this, we will stay a victim in our relationship. Mm-hmm. We're giving away all of our power. Not that we need power. That's not what I mean. But what I'm saying is we're putting the outcome of the relationship into somebody else's hands. And we're just saying, I can't do anything. I can't. And that is complete trash. It's the least place where, like Jesus is not in that spot at all. And there's nothing beautiful about it. And it's ugly. You've probably felt like that too. I've had my own pity parties and sent out invitations just about, where I've been so miserable and this is all their fault. Did you see the thing they did? And it's a miserable, ugly, nasty place to live, but we don't have to stay there. And that's probably one of the key things to look at is how do you get out of that? And why does it matter?
Yeah. It's a tough place, because I find that it is a mindset that we adopt. And, it's almost like somebody has to knock us over the head in order for us to snap out of that, that thinking. And I was actually just talking to someone today about labels and how sometimes when we're in victim mode, how we often label the other person very, very quickly. And, she was curious about what it was that I was referring to and why it wasn't okay for her to label that other person. And she had all her reasons to justify. And what I ended up having to show was that it wasn't helpful. she didn't realize that it was really more harmful to find fault than it was to just own her part. And that, would eventually move her into a solution. And so I think it's a lot of work that has to happen. And so, hopefully, today our conversation will help people get there and reach that place. So,
you bring up a powerful point when you're talking about labeling other people. That is an action of contempt. Where we're superior to another person. And Gottman's research, he's the University of Washington professor that's got over 40 years of data, double-blind, gold standard research studies on couples and what works and what does not, why some marriages succeed and why others fail. And the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, as he calls it, the relational apocalypse, are criticism, contempt, defensiveness, and stonewalling. And you don't get contempt without those other 3. So criticism is, I'm going to evaluate, judge this thing that you've done negatively. Okay. So that's me deciding that whatever just happened here is bad. And maybe it was bad, but I'm placing judgment on it. And most of the time we do that without even fully understanding what's going on. I'll never forget this story. Years and years and years ago, when I was in a marriage class, this pastor was talking about how he and his wife had this really stupid interaction one morning where he brought her a piece of toast, and he would make her toast every single morning. And she would look at it and she would just scowl at him, and she'd eat it, but she was grumpy about it. And he didn't do it every morning, but when he did, she'd give this negative reaction. And finally she just kind of lost it one day. And she's like, I am so done with this shabby treatment from you. And he's like, what are you talking about? And she says, every morning that you make me breakfast, you give me the heel of the bread. You are so selfish. You keep the good pieces for yourself and you give me this garbage end piece. And he says, well, that's my favorite part. Yeah, right?
Wow.
Yeah. Like, how often does that happen? Well, the data shows us we're wrong most of the time when we think we know what's going on in somebody else's head. And yet we're doing it. We're criticizing, condemning, and complaining as if we know what's true, and we don't. So we're giving life to Satan. We're following the enemy in that space, and it destroys, it divides. So that's not cool. And then what happens when we do that, the other person responds defensively, and then we respond defensively. So then you have that stupid cycle going. But at the bottom of that pit, and stonewalling is where honestly, most men are the ones that stonewall. They don't know what to do with the flooding response. They're like, I don't know what to do with this. And so they leave the conversation, and it takes them a lot longer, statistically speaking, to lower their level of emotionality. And so they'll leave a conversation. You have the traditional or classical stereotypical wife chasing the husband around the room kind of thing, trying to have a conversation. He's like, I can't do any more of this, right? So none of that's good, but at the big thing is there contempt in the relationship. And so that labeling is, I'm superior to you, which, pride, ouch. And I've decided you're most commonly known as a narcissist. That's the thing right now in our culture. You're selfish, therefore you are. And it's amazing to me. Like, I had 2 coaching calls this morning where both of the people were labeling their spouse and had friends that labeled their spouse as narcissists. Nobody here has gone to graduate school,
Right?
2 years
Yeah.
study to be able to therapeutically use the DSM-5 and label that person accurately as whether or not they're that selfish. Like, we all have that in us. Yeah, I don't feel qualified, and I've got 30-some years of working with people. I'm not going to label somebody with that. It's just like, we don't label people as abusive.
Right.
We believe that God is in people, and because he's in us, we're good. So we're going to focus on that, and you're going to see whatever you're looking for. If you want to see abuse, you're going to find it.
Absolutely. Ouch. Definitely.
Yeah.
I want to talk about what causes us to go there. But before I do that, I want to do a quick plug and lead people to our website. We have a free ebooklet available that's geared toward Christian married couples who are stuck in the same dynamic, this conflict, this cycle that you just can't break. You've been to the therapist, you've read the books, you've, paid everybody, and you just are still stuck. And so we invite you to check out our website, greaterimpact.org, and download that in your spare time. Okay, back to the conversation on this whole victim mindset, not owning up, labeling people narcissists when you haven't really been licensed to do so. Where does that come from? Is there something deeper going on underneath that? Because if we think in biblical terms, what comes to mind is the whole get the log out of your own eye, argument before you point out the speck in the other person. Well, I think it's more to it than that. There's a lot other things going on.
Yeah, and there's multiple facets to this. First of all, we have this notion that we sin less than someone else, or we're better than, or because we sin differently. Really, it's also rooted in our identity. So where I'm weak in who I am, I'm easily injured by other people and their opinions. And so I have these expectations that somebody is going to, rescue me or treat me or parent me, heal me in this space. I don't even know that I've got them. This is typically what happens with people is we go into a situation and we expect this other person to have this certain response because that's what we would do. And they don't, and they're different than we are. And then we take offense to that because we've got some childhood wounding or we believe a lie. And then we project that onto this other person. And now we've got World War III happening. And this is going to sound really rude and blunt, maybe too direct, but we all just need to grow the ever-loving heck up. When, we have places in us, and that sounds so rude, but we have places in us that need parenting.
Yeah.
And Jesus wants to parent us in those spaces. God wants to be a good father and heal us of those lies that we believe, the I'm not good enough, or everything needs to be perfect, or I won't be liked, all that garbage. And he wants to heal us of that. And what happens when we are healed of it is it's easy for us to own our mistakes. The most confident people in the world, somebody can say, hey, you did this thing. Even if they didn't do the thing, they can say, hey, you did this thing and it hurt me because da, 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 da. And the person responds humbly. I'm so sorry you're feeling like this. I hate it that I hurt you in this way. Tell me more about this. How can I help? It's that attitude versus, well, I didn't do that. And you shouldn't be feeling you get argument and you get bam, fight, right? Not useful. And the reason we're defensive is because of what's broken in us.
Right. Yeah. Usually we haven't dealt with that thing. So we can't even contribute to the conversation in a productive manner. Last week I had a couple of people that actually apologized to me about a thing, and I don't even remember all the details, but they're not important. But the point I want to make is that them being able to come to the table and apologize just opened up a whole new opportunity to connect that was not there before. It did not happen until that person actually owned what they did. And that's, I think, the place where we get stuck, is that we can't move forward until somebody says, you're right, I did this thing. And I hate that, that part of us, that prideful part of us that just refuses to do that, because we don't realize how much we're missing out on in that relationship.
Yeah.
But man, oh man, when it happens, it's like, oh, okay, now we can finally get somewhere, right? So it's a thing. And I wish, yes, we were parented better. I wish there were more awareness around this type of stuff, which is what we're trying to help people with.
Yeah. And a note about the parenting thing, I really believe that all of us are doing our best. And that includes our parents, right? Our parents did their absolute best. I was talking this morning with somebody about how, their spouse has this huge shame response anytime they bring, hey, it hurt my feelings when you said XYZ in front of, the neighbors yesterday, or whatever it is they bring to them. The spouse has this shame response because anytime they did anything bad or wrong or made a mistake, they were shamed as a kid. And I really believe that, person's parents were doing the best that they could at the time. That's what a lot of parents did back then.
Yep.
And, you could have the most perfect parenting moments and you're still going to deal with the enemy with your kids, right?
Right.
So if we make the assumption that everybody's doing their best, then, when that occurs, I can go, that response isn't about me. I'm not going to own it.
Right.
I'm also not going to allow it into the relationship. And what that means is I'm going to protect, love protects, right? So I'm going to protect the relationship by saying, hey, it seems like something's set off in you around this. Let's talk about this later. I want to hear more about how you're feeling, but let's do this when we can both be calm. And you put space, you insert space in there. And a lot of times, now I'm going to make a sexist comment here potentially. This is just going off the data. Okay. This is Gottman's data. Men in general will ruminate and stress more over what just happened, and they'll think negative thoughts. And so what is useful is for the wife in that situation, although women do this too, but whoever, to say, hey, do you mind praying about this while we're apart, and ask God what he thinks about it? And maybe when we come back together, we can pray together and move forward together and talk about what's going on with this. Because I don't want to hurt. I know something's hurting in you right now. Let's work through this together. And so it's an opportunity to help your spouse level up as an adult, and the more you do this with your partner, the more likely they are to pick up some of these behaviors and then do them with you. Because in the ideal situation, when you're a child, when I'm a child, maybe my spouse can show up and help me level up, because nobody's perfect at this. We're still stuck being humans. We always will be. Yeah.
Yeah. And we have blind spots that the people closest to us can see a whole lot better than we can. So chances are, we can't hide it anyway. It's going to come back around in some way, shape, or form. So, all right. What is that thing we want our listeners, in your opinion, to walk away with? What is the one powerful tool that they can do or use to help change this entire dynamic?
For me, it's a coaching question. Okay. And I use it with myself. I use this with clients when I'm working with them. Sometimes I'll ask my spouse or my 20 somethings this question, my friends. What would you like to have done differently? If you could have a do-over, how would you have liked to have shown up differently? And in that, if I'm really stuck in pity party and I go, well, I couldn't have shown up differently. Okay, Nina, what's that about? Really? You're that big of a victim that you cannot, your brain is so closed down that you can't think of 28 other options. Like there's always other options, always. So if you were to be the person that you want to be, if, it's the, what would Jesus do? Right? Well, we don't know what Jesus would have done sometimes in those spaces. We're blind. And so maybe we need to have a friend help us work through, I don't know how I could have shown up differently. What do you think about this? So we might need to get some outside help with that. But when I ask myself, how could I have shown up differently? I'm looking for the spot in the conversation where I didn't do what I could have done to have helped things go better. And that is usually tied to a negative emotion of mine, which is usually started by a negative perception or thought of mine towards the other person. I allow the enemy's thought about that person to infiltrate God's thought. Yeah. And so when I can find that moment, I can go, okay, so maybe they did just drive over my cat, Maybe I am mad about that. But instead of vomiting all over them and saying that you always and you never and you should have and da-da, maybe I could have taken a moment and gone inside and calmed down first and then come out and said, this is really upsetting to me. What happened? And if they, are in their place of defensiveness and all that, I can put up a hand and say, hold on, hang on. I want to connect over you. I'm sure you had something going on. Let's talk about what happened here. I need to see, I want you to see me. I want you to hear what's going on for me. So I help the other person see what they can do differently also. But I have no brain space, no mental capacity on my landscape whatsoever to do that if I'm emotionally upside down. We're not intelligent when we're doing that. We're not mature when we're emotional. And so that's the first place to start is what could I do differently, but find that.
Yeah. I can see that taking time to get to. You have to be in a place where you've dealt with yourself, your emotions. The flooding is subsided and you can actually be open. So, but I love that because it brings opportunity to redirect things. Gosh, it's something small that can completely change the course of the conversation. So I love that. So ask yourself what you could have done differently. Ask the other person as well, and watch this crazy cycle change for the better. So I love that. All right. Well, that I think concludes today's discussion on what to say when no one takes responsibility. We hope it's been helpful to you. We've got plenty of other good stuff. If you're interested, check out our next episode on YouTube, and we'll see you next time.